Have you ever met someone who, no matter how chaotic the situation, stays completely composed, while everyone else is panicking? They seem almost untouchable, calm, collected, and in full control. It is as if they are operating on a different level. And you can't help but wonder, how do they do it? What if I told you that this extraordinary calmness is not a natural gift reserved for a lucky few? It is a skill, one that can be learned, practiced, and mastered. Today, we are going to explore the secrets behind staying unshakable under pressure, inspired by the legendary samurai Miyamoto Musashi, who faced life or death duels yet never lost his composure. Imagine walking into a high-stakes meeting, giving a crucial presentation, or facing a personal challenge, and instead of feeling your heart race and your mind scatter, you feel steady, focused, and clear. You respond with precision. Your thoughts are organized, and your actions flow effortlessly. That is the power of training your mind, and it is exactly what we are uncovering today. Throughout this video, I will guide you step by step through techniques and insights that can transform how you handle pressure. You will learn how to reframe your perception of stress, practice mental discipline, and develop a presence that not only helps you perform at your best, but also earns the respect and trust of everyone around you. Before we dive in, take a moment to hit the like button if you are ready to master your calm. Subscribe to the channel for more practical strategies, and ring the notification bell so you do not miss any future videos. And do not forget to comment below what is one situation where you wish you could stay completely calm. Your story might inspire someone else watching this today. Now, let us uncover the ancient secrets that can turn you into someone who remains steady, no matter what chaos surrounds you. Long before modern leadership seminars and stress management techniques, there was a man whose name became synonymous with mastery, discipline, and an almost otherworldly calm in the face of danger. Miyamoto Musashi, a samurai of unparalleled skill, lived in an era where every duel could be the last, where a single misstep meant death, and yet he walked through life with a poise that seemed impossible to ordinary observers. What set him apart was not merely his swordsmanship, although that was legendary, but the way he trained his mind to remain unshakable, to move through chaos as if he were gliding through still water. This is the essence of what he captured in Gorin no Sho, the Book of Five Rings, a work often mistaken as merely a manual for combat, when in truth it was a blueprint for transforming one's mind into a fortress that no fear, no chaos, no pressure could penetrate. In reading Musashi's writings, one begins to see a recurring theme. Calm is not a luxury, it is a weapon. He described the mind as water, reflecting reality clearly when still, yet turning turbulent and distorted when agitated. The brilliance of his insight lies in the subtlety of this metaphor. He was not instructing warriors to meditate passively or to ignore the intensity of their battles. Rather, he was teaching them to cultivate a mental state so precise, so disciplined, that the world's dangers could not disturb their focus. Every duel he fought, every opponent he faced, became an exercise in mastering the invisible currents within his own mind. For he understood that the fiercest enemy often resides not across from you with a drawn sword, but within the chaotic interpretations of your own thoughts. The Gorin no Sho lays out principles that transcend combat and apply equally to any high-pressure scenario in life. Musashi spoke of the ordinary mind, a state in which one remains steady regardless of the surrounding environment, treating a moment of extreme risk with the same composure as a routine action. He taught the practice of productive emptiness, clearing the mind of anything unnecessary to allow for direct engagement with what truly matters in the moment. Ghost training, another concept he described, involved rigorous mental rehearsal, preparing the mind long before the challenge arrives, so that when it does, the reaction is instinctive, controlled, and perfectly calibrated. Even the reading of the environment, The silent observation of movements and intentions without emotional reaction becomes a form of strategy, a way to harness calm as an advantage. Musashi's genius lay not in making himself relaxed but in becoming unshakable. Through disciplined practice, deliberate preparation, and the cultivation of awareness, he transformed the mind into a force as steady as a mountain, one that projected confidence and control so powerfully that opponents faltered even before a strike was made. His system did not merely manage pressure. It eradicated the internal chaos that pressure feeds on. Every duel, every life or death moment, became a test of the mind's stability, a chance to refine the self into someone who could navigate uncertainty without hesitation, who could remain entirely present while the world swirled with danger around him. For those who study his work today, the lessons are profound. The principles Musashi outlined offer a roadmap for anyone seeking to confront high-pressure situations. Whether in the boardroom, on the stage, or in personal life, they teach that composure is not a passive state but an active mastery, that true calm is born of preparation and clarity rather than the absence of challenges, and that the mind, when trained with intention, can become a steady anchor mid-chaos. The Gorin no Show, therefore, is far more than a book about swords. It is a guide to becoming someone whose presence commands respect, whose decisions are clear, and whose inner equilibrium remains intact no matter what storms arise, allowing the wisdom of centuries-old samurai discipline to illuminate paths far beyond the battlefield. Even long after Musashi's era, the lessons of his life remain startlingly relevant because the mind has not changed as much as we might think. Centuries later, the mechanisms that triggered fear in a samurai facing a duel continue to govern our own responses to pressure. And what many fail to realize is that the threat we feel is often entirely self-created. Imagine standing before a room full of colleagues, a critical presentation in your hands, the stakes high enough to make your pulse race. And yet the danger is not actually physical, it exists in the narratives your brain constructs. In the vivid movie playing across your imagination, where every misstep is catastrophic, every mistake irreversible, and every observer a judge of your competence, the cortisol surges, adrenaline floods the system, and the primitive centers of the brain interpret these imagined outcomes as a life or death emergency, compelling the body to react as if a predator lurked just beyond sight. And in that moment, hands tremble, heart pounds, and thoughts scatter because the body cannot distinguish between reality and the scenario you have built in your mind. This is, in the modern world, an executive can feel the same terror at a boardroom presentation that a warrior felt facing a blade, because the stress is not in the external situation but in the perception, and perception can be trained, shaped, and ultimately mastered. When John, the executive we met earlier, realized that the paralysis he experienced was triggered not by the actual presentation, but by his mind's projection of failure, it was as if a veil lifted. He could see that the enemy was not the board, the clients, or the stakes themselves, but the internal scripts that his brain had rehearsed endlessly, scripts that amplified fear, exaggerated risk, and hijacked his ability to respond rationally. Neuroscience confirms this centuries later. The amygdala, the brain's alarm system, fires in response to imagined threats just as powerfully as real ones, releasing chemicals that prime the body for immediate action, often before conscious thought has a chance to intervene, which explains why even the most experienced professionals can be undone by the invisible pressure of their own expectations. Understanding this is a turning point, because it reframes every high-stress situation, not as an external trial to be conquered, but as an internal battlefield where calm is cultivated, not imposed. By learning to recognize that the fear is generated from within, by observing the mind's patterns without immediately reacting, and by practicing presence and focus in low-stress environments, it becomes possible to recalibrate the nervous system, to rewrite the brain's habitual response to perceived threats, and to approach challenging moments with the clarity and steadiness that Musashi embodied in his duels. The realization that the mind manufactures much of the pressure we experience opens the door to techniques such as mental rehearsal, ordinary mind practice, and productive emptiness, which all serve to dismantle the false threats that trigger fight or flight responses, allowing individuals to respond to reality rather than to the exaggerated dangers imagined in their own heads. In this way, centuries-old samurai wisdom intersects seamlessly with modern neuroscience. Both reveal that composure under pressure is less about external control and more about mastering the internal landscape of the mind, learning to observe, simulate, and clear mental clutter so that when the true challenge arrives, the response is grounded, deliberate, and entirely unshakable, as if the chaos of the world were flowing around a still and steadfast center, leaving the observer free to act with precision and confidence rather than react in fear. For Musashi, true mastery was never about the skill of the sword alone. It was about the cultivation of a mind that remained unshaken even when the world around him descended into chaos, a state he described as the ordinary mind. This principle is not merely philosophical, it is practical, a roadmap for navigating any situation where stakes are high and uncertainty looms. Imagine a moment where everything seems to demand your immediate reaction, the clamor of competing voices, the pressure of imminent decisions, and the invisible weight of expectation pressing down. For most, such circumstances trigger scattered thoughts and emotional turbulence. Yet Musashi demonstrated that the mind could be trained to maintain a consistent center, a mental stillness that does not fluctuate with the chaos surrounding it. It is the ability to carry oneself through life's trials as if walking through a storm without being buffeted by its winds, to engage fully with each task without the interference of panic, self-doubt, or distraction. This ordinary mind is not a suppression of emotion or a mechanical detachment from reality. Rather, it is the deep understanding that inner stability is the foundation upon which all effective action rests. In practice, it means that an executive delivering a high-stakes presentation or a negotiator facing aggressive opponents can maintain the same composure and clarity they would have in a quiet, familiar setting, treating external pressures not as threats but as elements to be observed, assessed, and responded to with precision. The process requires deliberate conditioning, starting with low-pressure scenarios where one consciously replicates the mental state of calmness, gradually building up to increasingly challenging situations, much as Musashi did in the training of his duels, allowing the nervous system to recalibrate, reducing the automatic fight or flight responses, and creating a habitual state of unshakable equilibrium. Through repeated practice, the mind learns that the intensity of external events does not dictate inner turmoil. And over time, this ordinary mind becomes a default mode, a stable anchor that allows for clear perception and decisive action even when the stakes are highest. Musashi's teachings suggest that the ordinary mind is also inherently empowering. It provides a lens through which one can read the environment without distortion, recognize opportunities and threats with accuracy, and act strategically rather than react impulsively. In essence, maintaining this stable, imperturbable mind transforms pressure from an adversary into a tool, allowing challenges to be navigated with creativity, poise, and effectiveness. The ordinary mind becomes the silent strength behind every confident decision, the invisible current supporting actions that appear effortless to observers, and the bedrock of resilience that ensures composure is not a fleeting performance but a natural state of being. By internalizing this principle, the lessons of centuries-old samurai wisdom extend beyond the battlefield into every facet of modern life, offering a way to engage with complexity, uncertainty, and high stakes not with fear or frantic reaction, but with a serene authority that shapes outcomes rather than being shaped by them, proving that the mastery of the mind is the most powerful form of mastery there is. John had spent years believing that composure under pressure was something one was simply born with, an elusive trait reserved for the naturally gifted or the extraordinarily brave. But Musashi's teachings suggested otherwise. Calmness could be trained, cultivated like a muscle through deliberate and repeated practice. He began with what seemed almost trivial at first. Choosing everyday, low-pressure situations to experiment with maintaining the same mental state he wanted to carry into high-stakes moments. Ordering coffee at a crowded event, walking into a room full of colleagues, engaging in routine conversations. Each action became a laboratory for training the ordinary mind, a place to observe how thoughts, emotions, and bodily reactions could be aligned in a steady rhythm. At first, the results were discouraging. His heart raced, palms sweated, and the familiar tension of nervousness insisted on intruding even in these mundane scenarios. But the principle was clear. By consistently practicing calm when the stakes were low, the mind and body would gradually learn that composure was the natural response, not the exception. As days passed, John noticed subtle shifts. He began to respond to interruptions without frustration, to small mistakes without panic, and to minor conflicts with steady clarity. Each experience reinforced the neural pathways associated with calmness, rewiring his stress responses over time, and making the elusive ordinary mind tangible, accessible, and reliable. The practice was not about pretending that he was fearless or denying the presence of emotions. It was about creating a habitual mental state that remained stable regardless of external circumstances. This was the groundwork that Musashi emphasized, the slow and deliberate conditioning that prepared the mind to face far greater challenges. The ordinary mind did not emerge overnight. It was forged through repetition, patience, and conscious attention, turning seemingly inconsequential moments into powerful exercises in mental fortitude. Soon, John found that when higher pressure situations arose, a difficult negotiation, a challenging presentation, a sudden conflict, the foundation built in low-pressure settings allowed him to navigate the moment with ease. Whereas previously adrenaline spikes would hijack his focus and scatter his thoughts, he now felt a continuity in his mental state, a steadiness that translated into clearer thinking, precise responses, and a quiet confidence that others could sense. The principle was simple yet profound. If the mind could remain unshaken when the risk was small, it could also hold its composure when the stakes were immense. This was not mere theory. It was embodied experience, a living demonstration of Musashi's insight that preparation and consistency in the ordinary lay the groundwork for mastery in the extraordinary. By anchoring calmness in everyday actions, John transformed his internal landscape, proving that the extraordinary composure he had envied in others was not a mysterious gift, but a skill to be trained, developed, and internalized. Each low-pressure practice session became a rehearsal for real challenges, each moment of controlled breathing and steady focus reinforcing the neural architecture of resilience. And gradually, the ordinary mind became the default state rather than a deliberate effort. Through this disciplined approach, Musashi's centuries-old teachings revealed their timeless relevance. Composure under extreme pressure is not born from heroic acts or sudden courage. It is built quietly, persistently, and deliberately in the seemingly mundane moments, until the mind has been shaped into a force that cannot be easily shaken, a presence that moves through chaos with clarity, precision, and unshakable confidence, turning ordinary practice into extraordinary mastery. As John progressed in his journey to master calm under pressure, he began to notice a recurring obstacle that no amount of ordinary mind practice could fully resolve: the relentless chatter of his own thoughts. Even when he maintained composure in low-pressure situations, when the stakes rose, his mind seemed to multiply the number of distractions, worries, and imagined consequences, sapping his focus and energy before he had even taken action. It was at this moment that Musashi's principle of productive emptiness, or mu, became strikingly clear. Unlike meditation for relaxation or escapism, Musashi's emptiness was purposeful. A strategic clearing of the mental field to leave only what was essential for the task at hand. John realized that every unnecessary thought, fears about outcomes, self-criticism, judgment of others, or anxiety about what might go wrong was like a hidden weight, draining the mind's resources and blurring perception. To act with clarity under pressure, these thoughts had to be intentionally set aside, creating mental space for full engagement with the present moment. He began developing his own method of mental clearing before any situation that demanded performance. 3 simple questions guided the process. What do I need to do now? What do I need to know now? How do I need to be now? Any thought that did not contribute to the answers was released, allowed to drift away rather than clinging to his consciousness. Fear of judgment, worry about results, and rehearsed scripts of failure were swept aside, leaving only the task itself, the relevant knowledge, and the mental state required for optimal performance. What emerged from this discipline was not emptiness in the sense of passivity or detachment, but a heightened form of presence, where perception became sharper, decisions more precise, and actions flowed naturally without interference. John discovered that the energy previously consumed by mental clutter was now redirected toward observation, judgment, and execution, giving him a calm efficiency that those around him noticed immediately. In practice, this meant that during a high-stakes presentation, a critical negotiation, or a tense discussion, he no longer wrestled with the storm of his own imagination. Questions and challenges could be addressed directly, responses delivered with clarity, and strategic decisions made without hesitation, because the mind was no longer divided between the real task and imagined distractions. It was a principle that echoed Musashi's own experience in duels, where hesitation or divided attention could mean instant defeat, and where only the essentials, the opponent's movement, the timing of one's own action, and the readiness of the body and mind mattered. By systematically removing all that was superfluous, John was able to replicate that focus in modern life, turning high-pressure situations into arenas of precision rather than arenas of fear. This approach also revealed a subtle psychological advantage. By training himself to release unnecessary thoughts, John became less reactive to provocations, less influenced by external chaos, and more attuned to subtle cues in his environment. The clarity afforded by productive emptiness allowed him to read situations, anticipate reactions, and act with confidence without being swayed by internal noise. It was the difference between moving through life as a participant overwhelmed by circumstance and moving as an observer and actor fully in command of attention and intention. Over time, the practice of clearing mental clutter became a habitual preparation, an invisible tool that made calm composure second nature, turning ordinary challenges into opportunities to exercise focus and presence. In this way, Musashi's centuries-old principle of mu transformed John's internal landscape, demonstrating that the mastery of thought is inseparable from the mastery of action, and that by removing what is unnecessary, one liberates the mind to fully engage, respond, and excel in any moment, regardless of the chaos that surrounds it. As John deepened his practice of the ordinary mind and productive emptiness, he encountered the next crucial stage in Musashi's system: preparation before the battle, a concept Musashi described through the practice of ghost training. Unlike ordinary practice, which dealt with calm everyday actions, this method involved vividly imagining high-pressure situations long before they actually occurred, creating a mental blueprint that allowed the mind to move through stress as though it were already familiar territory. John began each day by dedicating 20 minutes to detailed visualization. He would see himself walking into the conference room for a critical presentation, the board members seated and attentive, the weight of millions in decisions hanging invisibly in the air, yet his body remained steady, his breathing even, and his posture confident. He pictured every question, every interruption, every skeptical glance, and rehearsed his responses with the same clarity and composure he had cultivated in low-pressure practice. The goal was not fantasy or wishful thinking. It was rigorous mental conditioning, a way of allowing the mind to experience the pressures of the real world safely and repeatedly, so that when reality arrived, the brain would recognize it as familiar rather than threatening. Initially, the exercises felt artificial. Thoughts would wander, adrenaline would spike even in imagination, and moments of self-doubt crept in. Yet persistence brought change. Each rehearsal rewired the neural pathways responsible for stress and reaction, training the brain to interpret challenging situations not as emergencies, but as tasks to be approached with measured presence. By the time the actual high-stakes scenario arrived, John's mind had already lived through it hundreds of times. He knew what to expect. His responses had been practiced, and the body's reactions to perceived threat were diminished. What had once caused trembling hands, racing heartbeat, and scattered focus now elicited calm clarity, as though the pressure had been defanged by repeated mental exposure. The brilliance of this approach lies in the intersection of imagination and physiology. Neuroscience shows that the brain does not always differentiate perfectly between vivid mental rehearsal and lived experience. The neural circuits activated during imagined stress are largely the same as those engaged during real stress. Musashi understood this intuitively, centuries before modern science could explain it, and his practice of ghost training ensured that his mind was always several steps ahead, that by the time the duel commenced, the combatant was already mentally prepared for every contingency, moving with precision rather than reaction. John found that the principle applied to modern challenges with astonishing effectiveness. Each visualization reduced the novelty of the situation, and with familiarity came a profound decrease in the instinctive fear response. He could face presentations, negotiations, and even conflict with a steadiness that surprised colleagues and, more importantly, himself. Over time, the mental rehearsal became a kind of armor, a buffer between perceived danger and actual performance. By repeatedly simulating the pressures he feared, John effectively neutralized the mind's tendency to amplify threat. Stress was no longer an unpredictable force, but a known variable, a landscape he had traversed countless times in preparation. This stage of training demonstrated that the mastery of composure is not reactive but proactive, that it is sculpted in advance, during quiet moments of disciplined imagination, and that by confronting the fear of pressure in the mind before it arises in reality, one can step into challenging moments with confidence, clarity, and the unshakable calm that defines true mastery. Musashi's wisdom, encoded in these practices, reveals a timeless truth. The battlefield of the mind is where victory begins, and by rehearsing it in advance, the chaos of the world can be met not with panic but with presence. By the time John had fully integrated Musashi's 5 principles: ordinary mind, productive emptiness, ghost training, reading the environment without reaction, and the Unshakable Center, he began to notice an extraordinary shift not only within himself but in the way others responded to him. The calm he exuded was no longer just a personal tool. It had become a silent force that shaped interactions, decisions, and outcomes around him. In meetings, his steady presence drew attention not through volume or force, but through the quiet authority of someone completely grounded. Colleagues who previously dominated conversations now found themselves pausing, reconsidering, and revealing information they might have withheld, simply because the calm reflected back at them made their own turbulence evident. Negotiations became less about pressure and more about strategic exchange, as his composure created a subtle psychological advantage. Others unconsciously measured their actions against his serenity, often giving more than they intended, exposing weaknesses, or overcompensating in ways that played into his favor. John realized that true calm is a form of power, a leverage that extends beyond personal mastery into influence. It communicates confidence, clarity, and competence without uttering a single word, establishing trust and authority in a way that reactive emotion never could. People instinctively follow those who remain composed under duress, not because of charisma alone but because a stable mind signals safety, competence, and decisiveness at a primal neurological level. Even clients and superiors responded differently to John. The calm that once intimidated him now intimidated others. Not in a threatening sense but in a way that subtly commanded respect. He had learned what Musashi centuries before understood. Serenity in action is not passivity but a strategic presence that shapes the environment, allowing one to act effectively while others react unconsciously. This transformation also carried profound personal benefits. John no longer experienced the paralyzing fear that had once dominated critical moments. His focus was sharp, his energy efficiently directed, and his decisions deliberate rather than impulsive. By clearing unnecessary thoughts, rehearsing high-pressure scenarios, and maintaining a steady internal state regardless of external chaos, he had freed himself from the internal storms that had once dictated his actions. Every challenge became an opportunity to exercise mastery rather than a threat to be endured. And in doing so, he discovered the deeper reward of Musashi's system. Freedom. Freedom from the tyranny of imagined pressure. Freedom to act with intention. And freedom to influence the world without coercion, simply by embodying calm. If you have followed John's journey and Musashi's timeless teachings this far, you now understand that calm is more than a personal asset, it is a strategic advantage that reshapes interactions, builds trust, and enhances performance in every domain of life. By training your mind, clearing distractions, practicing ordinary composure, and rehearsing the pressures you will face, you can develop an unshakable center that commands respect and elevates your presence in any situation. Thank you so much for watching, and if you found this video valuable, please make sure to like, subscribe, and click the bell so you do not miss future insights that can transform the way you navigate stress, pressure, and leadership. Remember, true calm is not just a state of mind, it is a way of being, and it is a power you can cultivate with consistent practice and intention.